Here we go. Okay, well, it is a delight to be here with each of you. Thank you for joining. This is the #1 way to overcome culture shock and thrive overseas as an expat. And there's a few things that I hope will be really beneficial to you in our short time together. And I'm eager to share those with you. I need to load one more thing because it's not quite coming up for me, but I'm going to have it in just 1 second. And here we should be good to go. Yes. Soon as I find the screen again. Okay. All right, here we go. So my promise to you is that instead of wrestling with self-doubt and just kind of all of those daily challenges and overwhelming feelings that come with living overseas, that you can gain clarity and understanding on what's getting in your way and how to confidently move forward in building a thriving expat life. So we're going to specifically discover why what you've been doing and what I have done over the past few months or even years to feel at home in your new country isn't working so well. And I'm going to walk you through some things that really will help you to have a stronger sense of home. And one of them might be to get a dog, or maybe not to. I don't know if you can hear my dog, but I sure. So I want you to just imagine being able to just kind of overcome a lot of second guessing and a lot of the kind of just daily grind that comes with living overseas and really kind of building the life that you longed for. So I don't know if you can relate to any of these. Maybe there's something here you relate to, or maybe there's something else. Feel free to type it in the chat box. I've definitely spent a lot of the last 10 years struggling with sleep, not enough or too much, because I'm trying to make up for living between multiple time zones. Overworking to make up for feeling incompetent, overbooking yourself, trying to explore and learn everything. On the flip side, sometimes it's just stay home and do nothing, living in a tourist destination, but never seeing anything because it's just too overwhelming. Cramming to try to learn the language, relying on people back home, or maybe overeating McDonald's or some kind of whatever that familiar kind of junk food go-to might be for you. So I'm curious if you relate to any of these, or if there are others that you might relate to, if you want to type those in. Even with all of that, maybe you still feel like you're underperforming in your work or life, stuck living in survival mode indefinitely, exhausted and disconnected, second guessing yourself and your decision to live overseas, maybe even searching for flight tickets or other life options back home. Is any of that something that you relate to at all? If so, it is not your fault. You know, in my first year living overseas, I would Google whatever it was that I was feeling or struggling with and the words culture shock and try to see if I could make sense of my situation. And definitely there are times that the loneliness or feeling of disconnect or even just kind of confusion can be overwhelming. But none of us chose to live in the countries that we're living in now for that. Maybe you had some of these things in mind. You know, the dream might be to just like wake up every day rested and ready for adventure, confident, feeling connected and successful, culturally savvy. You kind of know what you need to linguistically and culturally to just kind of get through each day. We want to feel in control of our lives, like it's going where we want it to, and to be on target to reach our goals and to live our dream life. I'm curious for you guys, which one of these things on the screen most appeals to you?
Yeah, like this.
I'm pulling up the chat box and I see McDonald's, but I think that was the answer to the last question, right, Daniel?
Last one. I was trying to think if there's anything there. And that's like the only ones, like every time I would hang out with foreign friends. Oh, let's go to McDonald's, let's go to KFC, let's go. Like, why?
Yeah. Oh my.
So much better food than that.
Totally. Totally. And I see, Lawrence, that you shared like to feel connected.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And Robin, thanks for sharing. Yeah, just to all of these things and to make the most. Here you are, we're all kind of living something that most likely we dreamed about. We've made a huge decision and left behind a lot to do this, and we want to make the most of it. We don't want to just survive it, right? So this is a good chance for me to just kind of formally introduce myself, a little bit about me. I have spent the last 17 years helping, actually, I don't know, well over 100, maybe hundreds of people overcome the challenges of culture shock. And 10 years of that, I have been living overseas myself. And so the Culture Shock Solution, which is a 12-week coaching program that I developed along with Liz, she's on this call, is birthed out of that, just that desire for people like me who have made the decision to live overseas to really to make the most of it and to not have to go through the same struggles over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I am an ACC Leadership and Personal Development Coach. ACC is a certification offered by the International Coaching Federation. And I love coaching because it's more than just, telling people things, but really hearing people out and helping them to find their next steps forward. So I also, I think I misclicked something, but yeah, I know what it's like to second guess my feelings and perceptions and to even hesitate to reach out for help when I'm struggling. Why is it so hard? I should be getting this, those kinds of thoughts. But I've learned to really kind of feel comfortable in my skin living overseas and to make the most of it. I still have hard days as an expat, but they don't make me question my dreams or my ability to thrive right where I am anymore. So you can see this picture here on the screen. That was me, I think, the first day that I arrived here in Korea. The picture at the top, I brought everything with me. So it seems like I was all in from the beginning. And and maybe it's symbolic. Maybe I brought a little baggage with me as well. But I remember, yeah, what it was like to be at the beginning and yeah, really having this dissonance between the dream that I had and everything just actually feeling worse and worse and more off as time went by. I was just powering through hard days, feeling exhausted, alone, and frustrated, kind of wondering what was wrong with me and really feeling like I was failing at my dream. No matter how hard I pushed myself, it still felt like I was only performing at about 30% of my capacity before moving overseas. I was feeling emotions that were uncharacteristic for me, including lots of anger welling up. And before moving overseas, I had always been really optimistic and good at just turning, getting caught in a rainstorm into just a joyful story. but something had just changed, and I found myself, crying in public places and wishing that it was okay to yell at strangers. And I found myself saying things that I had never said before, like, I want to quit and go home. So there were a lot of days that, and you live overseas, so some days you set out to do this very simple task. You know exactly what to do, where to go, and you can spend hours and hours, and it's just impossible. And so I had some of those days, of course, but that's not where things are anymore, and I'm really, really thankful for that. But I'm just curious for you. Maybe you can put in the comments, like, what is kind of the biggest struggle for you right now in your overseas life? What's the thing that just really gets to you? I have a friend who's been living here for 10 years as well. And she was sharing the other day about this whole complicated thing where basically she's just trying to get an app to work. And if she got that to work, she was going to get 50% off of her Starbucks drink. And it literally took hours and it didn't work. And she ended up in tears. And it was not about $3. It was about, why can't I function in this world that I've been living in for so long? And it's that double-edged sword where when you're first starting out, you don't know what to do. And you're new. But then when you've been around for a while, and there are still those struggles, still those feelings of just being disconnected. So yeah, kind of waiting here for a second just to see what anybody might pop in the chat. For me, when I was putting together these slides, I was asked to, oh yeah, thanks for sharing, Lawrence. Just, yeah, that struggle to feel connected. And yeah, Daniel, the language fluency, like that can certainly be in the way between language and culture. You can be in the room with people, you can be at the house with people and still just feel so disconnected. Absolutely. So as I was, preparing this slide, oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Lawrence. That word expat, right? It carries a lot of connotations to it. So it's been a struggle for me. How do I clearly say who I'm talking to? Because you're right. The same thing. I've never really identified with the idea of an expat. Here I am living in an international bubble and I'm going home soon. So totally see what you're talking about. Yeah, Robin, how do you invest in friendships, and how do you get people to invest in building friendship with you when they know you're going to leave and you know you're going to leave? Right. Yeah. Glad you mentioned those things, Lawrence. This is for people who know the struggle, who want to make living overseas work, whether that's, for 4 years or forever. And whether that's in the corporate world or military or for family, whatever that purpose is. I wish that I could tell you that I had this one light bulb epiphany moment in which everything was clear to me. But really, it's been 10 years of learning things one day at a time. And that's part of why I'm excited about this webinar and about this whole program in the Culture Shock Hub, because I really want to give others the opportunity to have a defining moment, to make a decision that empowers you to forge a new path. And so this conversation is relevant whether you're at the very beginning and you just moved overseas and it's all still new, maybe even not even challenging yet because you're in that honeymoon phase, or you've been at it for years and years. Because even for me, I believe having this conversation today is an opportunity to have an important moment to say, wait a second, I want to take another step in really getting settled in and thriving in this life that I've chosen. And that's what we're here for. So You've heard of trial and error. I think living overseas is a lot more trials and so much error. Everything that I knew and every skill that I had employed to be successful before moving overseas did not help. Even though I am now able to feel at home in my overseas life, it took a long time to figure it all out. And I had to unlearn a lot of things that I was very convinced were the right way. I can remember early on, a colleague had made an appointment with me and actually were introducing a potential recruit to some of the programs that we had available, and the colleague stood us up, and I was so like probably offended. How could you say you were going to have this meeting and then it's the time and we're losing face in front of this other person? And I remember that happened in my first year here, and then in my second year, towards the end of the year, I had this aha moment where I realized what had actually happened that day. But because I was new in my first year, I couldn't read the subtleties. And even though my colleague had said, yes, of course, we can have that meeting, through nonverbals, through some of the context, something else had been communicated entirely. And I had missed that. And I thought, how is this person dishonest and lying? Because I failed to understand the situation. And there's so many examples like that. And that's why we need some kind of support to be able to kind of filter through, and there's nothing on Google that would have ever made sense of that for me. What I needed was to develop a global mindset and cultural fluency, and I needed help to sort out my experiences and make sense of what was happening. So it took a lot of time and patience, and there was no way that I could have discovered the principles of the culture shock solution without investing in my professional education and just doing the time in cross-cultural living to gain some expertise. But I was committed to figuring it out, and I knew that I couldn't just go home and live life as I once knew it. And I don't know for some of you, or you've been living overseas for a long time, if you can relate to that. Going home isn't easy anymore either. I've been gone too long. And so I don't fit here sometimes, and I don't fit there either. And so it's sometimes it can be like, and even I think, Robin, you said it's 4 years, but you won't be the same person when you get home. And so there's something to this, and even to what it looks like to adjust when going back, that's so significant. So one of the things that I just want to remind you, and you may not be thinking in this way at all, but the struggle of living overseas, it's not because of a deficiency that you have. It's not because you're doing it all wrong. It is something that every expat experiences. And so, yeah, I want you to know that this isn't an issue of, oh, overseas life is just something I'm not cut out for. Almost everybody who lives this life goes through this process and feels these things. But some do get some support and help that they need in order to really begin to settle in and thrive. And that's available to you. So I want to share basically 3 concepts that I think will be super helpful to you. But first, I want to share a couple of stories of some friends of mine. First of all, Javier is in the corner of this picture, the person the farthest to the right, I think, if that's how it's showing up on your screen. And he was not sure that this overseas life would work out. But after getting some support, he was able to continue through the cultural adjustment process, received a top level promotion at his job, and started a family overseas. But in the beginning, there was a lot of questioning. Should I just go home? I don't know that this is for me. But he ended up extending and staying longer than he had originally planned. Carrie is, a sweet friend, and she was about to book a flight back home when we met. She'd been in Korea for about a month and just was overwhelmed, and had actually already taken some steps to unenroll from her academic program. But after meeting together, she decided to stay in Korea and keep taking the necessary steps. So she ended up living overseas for 6 years, succeeded in her academic program, and continued forward. Jeannie here in this middle picture, during her time living overseas, grew much more comfortable in her own skin, graduated language skill, completed her program, got residency in the country, and landed a long-term job. So these are just a few of my friends who were able to actually get past some of these struggles and really, reach those personal goals and get that sense of connection. So one thing that we need to talk about is what is causing all of these sort of things that we struggle with, and how do we overcome them. But maybe what we're really familiar with is all the things that don't work. Sometimes in living overseas, there can be these kind of erratic or overwhelming feelings. But the truth is, when you understand why, they actually make a lot of sense. So you're not crazy. You're not losing your edge. We all experience this, whether or not we recognize the cause. A few things that I mentioned before that you might relate to, but that don't work: overworking, oversleeping, cramming language learning, trying to figure it all out now, relying on people at home, zoning out watching Netflix, overeating, comfort food. None of those things really get it done. And I guess I can just speak to a couple of those. Of course, we all know how important our sleep is, and our sleep rhythm, and how easy it is to get that off, especially if you are trying to live between different time zones and keep in touch with people back home. Overworking to make up for a sense of incompetence and just trying to catch up sounds good initially, but it's not sustainable. And it ends up continuing the feelings of isolation and disconnection, and even incompetency. Cramming language learning, it's just not how our brains acquire language. So where a lot of times the feeling is, if I just push harder, I can get through this. Actually, the opposite may be true. We may actually need to slow down and face a little bit of what's going on internally in order for these things to even be able to help. There's certainly that balance of needing those connections back home, but at the same time, people at home are not going to be able to provide the context that makes sense of some of the cross-cultural struggles you're experiencing. And maybe we all have that one friend who just says, "Why'd you move there anyway? You should just come back." And that's not encouraging by any means. And so, there are better ways. But we really need to get to the bottom of it. So the real reason that we're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, disconnected, and confused, the reason that all of these things, doing everything we know how to do, isn't working, is because they don't address the root cause, which is culture shock. And, when I say that, I could imagine a little bit of pushback, actually, because there's actually a lot of misunderstanding about what culture shock really is and isn't. A lot of times people talk about culture shock, to talk about some kind of food, like I was eating, I guess we call it live octopus. It's like still moving, the other day, and it's great actually, and the sauce is really great. But that kind of situation where people want to say something shock is about some difficult food, or like why are people wearing shoes in the house, or why aren't people wearing shoes in the house, or they didn't get my joke, or they laughed and I was serious, like all of those mismatches. But culture shock is so much deeper than that. Culture shock in terms of the psychological term and definition is something that every expat will experience. Every person living overseas will experience at some point in their journey, because it is an inevitable psychological phenomenon. Your entire system, your brain, your body, you have understood yourself. We have understood ourselves and our world through a complex series of predictable patterns and sequences, including everything from the weather to humor to interactions at the grocery store, problem solving. But suddenly, when we move overseas, everything that our brain has relied upon for decades to make decisions all day, every day is gone. And everyone around you is playing by different rules. It's kind of like these pictures. You think you're playing football, but you're surrounded by people who are playing American football, and they are tackling you, it feels like, and you're just trying to follow the rules and just have a simple game. That's what culture shock really is your brain trying to make sense of how the whole world is operating by a different set of rules. And a lot of it is actually just the exhaustion. Our brains make shortcuts all day, every day. In your house, there's probably certain places that you tend to sit. There's probably certain places that you tend to drop your clothes. There's probably certain, dishes that you prefer or don't. There's just so many things where our brains make shortcuts. And when we live outside of the country that we grew up in, a lot of that shortcuts don't work. And so literally our brain is just working overtime, always trying to make sense of everything that's going on. And because of that, we're exhausted. And it's not because of anything that we actually even have control over. It literally is something that's happening internally. In your home country, before you ever moved overseas, you might have woken up some morning feeling happy or sad or angry. And you could probably connect that feeling to something that had happened the day before or that was about to happen that day. It made sense. But when you wake up in all these places where you are, Malaysia, China, Japan, overseas, you don't wake up feeling culture shock, because that's not a feeling we've learned to identify. So you wake up feeling angry or depressed or just blah or sluggish or confused, and it doesn't make sense. You can't connect. Why do I have this feeling? Because it's so global. It's so touching every part of your life and also not specific to any one detail. And so maybe as you're kind of looking at your life overseas, maybe you're thinking, I'm just not cut out for this. Or maybe you feel depressed or anxious or really angry or, man, I'm bad at life. But there's a good chance that if you're feeling those things and you're living overseas, that it's all, or at least mostly, just this culture shock phenomenon that's happening internally. So it has been said that mindset is everything. And it's certainly important. And so I'm going to just go through a few slides about things that are just kind of comparing what you might be tempted to believe and what might be really going on. So maybe first of all, you would say, yeah, I'm not sure that I have culture shock. It's not really about the culture. It's not anything that's really shocking or upsetting me. I just feel really off. And like I was just sharing, culture shock is a lot more holistic than we think. And it's not just about the culture. It's about the fact that everything around you is different than what you spent decades of your life doing and being familiar with. So whether you're feeling just tired a lot or just not quite right or a little incompetent, isolated, homesick, all of those things have to do with, the actual disconnect that is I grew up in this, I was a fish living in water, and now there's no water. Or maybe it feels the opposite. I am not a fish, and I feel like I'm drowning in all of this water. But yeah, there's a good chance that, and maybe even a better term would be something like, whole life adjustment rather than culture shock. Everything has changed, and I'm trying to adjust to that. Maybe another thought that you think about sometimes is, wow, did we make the right decision? Was this just a mistake? Can I ever really be satisfied in this overseas life? And I had the opportunity to talk with some of you personally, but I don't know all of you, and I don't know your stories, but I do know this: you have been successful enough in making a decision and following through on it in your life that you decided to move overseas. You took the necessary steps, and you are living in this other country. Chances are you had a high level of motivation to take that step, and you had a high level of competency to follow through on it. And so even though it is hard, the fact that you're here today tells me you may very well have exactly what it takes to do this. And most likely you do. Depending on how you're feeling and how it's going, you could be at that place of, oh man, do I just need to pack up and go home before it gets worse? And that is an option. We do always have choices. There is always another way. But I have seen, and I shared about Carrie earlier, I have seen people in absolutely dire straits to make a decision to just take some simple steps that I'm going to be sharing with you, and they've actually been able to overcome and to succeed in the goals that they set for themselves in their new country, to get a degree, to start a new relationship, start a family, succeed at work. So yeah, you can pack up, but you don't have to, and you can make it through. There are changes that can happen even today that you have control over that can help. Or maybe you're still at I just have to power through. I'm going to fake it until I make it. I can't give up stage. And if that's you, what's that? The A Team, the guy says, I pity the fool. Like that kind of, it's a old television show, I think actually from the 80s. But this idea of if you're powering through, your crash is coming. Because there's only so long. So, if you're headed home in a few months, maybe you can power through until then. But indefinite powering through isn't possible. And so actually, I did this for a while. By the time I had been overseas for 3 years, I remember there was a period of time where I didn't take one day off for 6 months, and I was working 80-hour weeks, just trying to probably avoid feeling all the feelings and make up for the sense of I'm not quite doing all that I could do, and just trying to prove I can make this work. But that was not sustainable. And the truth is, there is actually a way to take the time to take care of yourself and actually be more successful than if you just push. Maybe you've already crashed and you're just too tired to care. I don't feel anything anymore. This is not the life that I want it to be, but I'm not sure that I have any hope that anything can be done about it. Just have to, breathe. And yeah, that's burnout, exhaustion. That's the road to depression, and some rest and some vital human connection, and really kind of letting your emotional system thaw out with some warmth can really make a difference. And we can do that in community. We can have conversations that will help to move past this place. we probably have all felt the frustration and confusion that comes. We don't want to be prejudicial or to overgeneralize, but sometimes we could find ourselves thinking, why would people do this? Why would people think that? How could they possibly interpret what I did? Why would they do? Why didn't they? And that's normal. I was a person who hardly felt anger before moving overseas, and I found myself livid at times. So if you already had a healthy relationship with your anger, then I'm sure it didn't take very long before some of that frustration came out. But there are tools and ways of understanding culture and really developing a global mindset, some ways to process what's going on around you that will help you to begin to understand what you don't understand, and some mindfulness tools that can help you to deal with the emotion and the frustration that comes. And probably the biggest thing that I felt in 10 years as an expat has been, from time to time, just very deep loneliness. And I talked about that earlier. I call people at home and they love me and we have good relationship. There's many things about my experience that they can't relate to, and don't even know what questions to ask about, right? And the same thing with people who are here local with me. We're going through the same things, but I'm living it with a totally different vantage point and background and history and cultural way of thinking. And so there is a loneliness and a feeling like nobody quite understands me. There can be homesickness, and depending on where you are in your journey, there can be that I don't want to tell anybody that I'm feeling homesick and lonely. And this is all just really, really normal. And finding a healthy balance between capitalizing on relationships back home, connecting with people who understand the very unique journey you're on, connecting with others who have walked through this. And again, that distinction earlier made about the term expat. If you really want to settle in and thrive at home, then you're going to want to connect with people who not only understand the struggle, but people who are committed to making a home out of this, to really understanding the culture. Because it's easy to find a group of people who hate everything where we are. But that's not going to help us to really settle in. We can just all be miserable together. So maybe you have even internalized some of the struggle, and you might be saying, man, I just don't feel like I can do this. I don't feel like I can do anything. I don't even know if I need to run this errand today, and I don't think it's going to work. What's wrong with me? And the answer is nothing. This is the kind of crux of the culture shock experience. And it's normal to not be able to do things on your A game, top of the line. Our capacity is significantly lower, especially when we're still in the heart of this cultural adjustment process. And just think about however old you are, you know what those numbers are. And think about the number of years that you spent in your home country, living life, doing things, figuring things out. Now throw all that away and you're at 0, 1, 2, 3, 8 years old. Of course, as a 4-year-old, you in your country, in this country that you're living in, you're not able to do everything as well as you can as, a 43-year-old. And that's normal. And it's frustrating because you've got, your whole life of experience so far, and ability to achieve and success and to express yourself. But then when we move to another country, in some ways we start over. The good news is we do bring those skills, those things that we know from home. The bad news is they don't always translate as smoothly as we would like for them to. So give yourself some compassion and patience. And when you consider how short you've lived in this country, compared to your whole lifetime, you may actually realize, wow, you're doing pretty well considering. Look around at the kids who are the age that you are, and sometimes that can be frustrating. You're like, they're better at the language. They know how to do this and this and this that I don't. But also, there's some things that you know how to do and that you've succeeded at. So here's the truth. You have made it this far. So you do have what it takes. And you even chose to come to this webinar. And so that means that there's some amount of an internal motivation. There's some desire to continue forward in this journey, to not get stuck in some of the struggle. So you do have every reason to cancel self-doubt and to begin to believe in yourself. And maybe for some of us, that's easier than for others, but you're here. So I believe that there are steps forward for each of you. And I know even for me. So a couple of steps that I took to overcome culture shock. I really like this picture and what it emphasizes. This is kind of like a metaphor, but culture is like a fabric. And that fabric consists of all these threads, which are people. And they're the people that we know, and they're the people who live by the same rules and speak the same language and have the same sense of humor. And finding yourself unwound from the culture that you know is extremely disorienting. And you go from that strength of that fabric to here I am, this string. And being woven into a new culture requires time and supportive community in the meantime. But it's doable. It's absolutely doable. Over these last 10 years, I have found the joy of sharing community with people who are walking through this together. And I've arrived at places in the journey where I had to make a decision to live here where I am instead of trying to maintain or live in a community where I'm not. And that's part of why we're here, is to bring community around and support for you. And so there were a few things that I realized that I needed. And so this is a little bit of, just some steps to take. I needed to validate my feelings and identify the real culprit, this cultural adjustment, psychological phenomenon that is studied and proven, and not really something that you can skip. I needed a step-by-step plan on how to build a new life from the ground up. I mean, when you show up in a new country, typically you kind of hit the ground running. Like, you've got to find a place to live. You got to figure out where to buy groceries. You've got to figure out, is this laundry detergent or fabric softener? And I've gotten that wrong so many times. And there's just so many things that you have to figure out that really it's almost impossible to take the steps that you need to take to really feel at home and establish yourself from the beginning, because you just got to do so many things to survive. And so that's why in the culture shock solution, I've set up a step-by-step plan for how to build a new life from the ground up. And it's the kind of thing where if you had moved overseas 3 months ago, it'd be helpful. And if you moved overseas 9 years ago, it's still this beautiful reset to help you get your bearings and really establish the things that you need to feel good in your skin and in your life. And to know, like, okay, I'm on solid ground and I can move forward from here. Number 3, I needed to identify the 7 key elements to adjusting cross-culturally and how to develop them within this new context. And so that's a big part of the culture shock solution. Local and global community, cultural fluency and a global mindset, confidence and competency, and really great self-care. I needed someone professional, somebody with expertise to ask questions, get emotional support, and receive guidance on practical steps forward. In my case, I actually did the run, push power through until burnout, until depression, until anxiety attacks. And so my professional was a counselor because I had allowed myself to get that far down the road before I got some support. And actually that was a beautiful journey too. And I am so thankful. But you don't have to go as far down the road as I did before you get somebody to really support you and help you to take steps forward. And the last thing that I needed and that I still need is accountability and a sense of community. Somebody who knows what's going on and knows the steps that it takes to keep moving forward and who cares where I am in that journey. So, yeah, that brings us pretty close to the end of our time together. I've still got a few more things to share, but before I do, I want to ask this question to you. What is your biggest takeaway from our time together so far? If you want to just drop that in the chat, or if you want to speak it out. But yeah, in just a couple of sentences, what are you taking away from this conversation so far? Maybe it's something that's a new idea. Maybe it's something that you've known, but it's just been a good reminder. Maybe it's a self-reflection, something you're realizing about yourself or your journey. Okay, Robin says great reminders. Lawrence knows he needs some fish and chips. You can make it. Tell us what time and where. Yeah. So yeah, everything that I have shared so far, and I'm trying to check what slide I need to be. Yeah, everything that I've shared so far are reasons why, why Liz and I work together to create the Culture Shock Solution, which provides 3 months of step-by-step instructions, week-by-week modules that walk you through the process of laying a solid foundation and rebuilding your life in a new country. I mentioned the 7 strands of the Culture Shock Solution, which include building confidence by leveraging your existing skills, increasing competency by developing new skills, strengthening community back home, while also giving yourself the time and energy to build new community locally. A very strong focus on rhythms of self-care and rest with routines that develop familiarity in this unfamiliar world, global mindset values, and cultural fluency insights. Together with others that are walking through the program, you get access to me as a professional leadership and personal development coach, and with all the experience that I have as an expat, as well as the experiences of others and that I've learned in walking with others. I'm so just loving this program and walking with people, and so sure that whether you focus in on just that, just really getting a firm foundation, a sense of home, or there's really one of the beautiful things about the disorienting nature of this cultural adjustment process is a beautiful opportunity to kind of rediscover yourself and to really learn a little bit more about, you know, how you were designed and what steps you want to take forward. It is a new opportunity. And so this program is an awesome reset that lets you dig those roots and build that sense of home to go forward. So just in recapping then, the root cause is culture shock. Don't let the actions that sabotage the cultural adjustment process become habitual and hold you back. It's not your fault. I talked about a number of the mindsets that create self-doubt, But the bottom line is you've made it this far. You have what it takes to really make it all the way and to really settle into the home that you've chosen. And yeah, the steps that I took, I got supportive community, developed a step-by-step plan. And good news for you, you don't have to make it up, I'll share. And I learned from people who had been there and found the way out. So my guess is that you showed up today for one of these reasons. And if you will, type in the box, why did you come to this webinar today? I'm guessing that you do want to thrive in your host country without having to forget who you are and just live in survival mode. If you're like me, yeah, just to live that simple life and have balance with routine and confidence and a global mindset, not just pushing down feelings of frustration, but really, yeah, accepting and enjoying the life that you're living. To stop feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, confused, alone, disconnected, and to have a fresh perspective so that you can feel confident, connected, and alive. Anything that you would add?
Hmm.
So I made a promise at the beginning, and that promise was that by the end that we could kick some of that self-doubt to the side and make some sense of the daily challenges and feelings that can even be overwhelming in living overseas, and get some clarity on what's going on and how to confidently move forward. And so I do want to just ask if you would like some support in your cultural adjustment process. And I just have a really simple way that I'd like to offer to help. And that is to just set up a call together. Lawrence and I actually got to have an opportunity to connect before. And the culture shock consultation is just a really great way for you to hear. I did a lot of talking, too much talking. I'm sorry for all this talking. But in the call that we can have together, I'd love to just set aside an hour to talk and mostly to ask some questions and to hear your story personally. I love to hear where somebody's at and what's going on with them, and to see how does your experience connect to this framework. What steps would help you forward? And I do have this program, this 3-month coaching program, but it's really, really important to me that when somebody comes to a consultation, I'm not just talking about a program. I want to hear your story, and taking the time to do that and to find your next step forward. And if that connects to the program and that's something that makes sense for us to talk about, then we will. And if not, that's okay too. But the promise that I've made to myself is that I want this call to be valuable, where every person walks away with something, a new mindset, some hope, an idea for a step forward. And that's something that has been really fun at the end of every consultation, to ask, hey, what are you walking away with? And to hear those things from people. So if you click a link, Liz, can you stick that link in this chat? Liz is going to give you guys the link because she's better at life than me. She'll have it faster than I will. And anyway, when you click that link, you can pull up something like this and you can pick a time. You can also adjust so it'll be looking at your own time zone. And we can just schedule a time to talk. We'll talk about what your vision is for overseas life, make sense of your biggest struggles, why it's worth it to you. What is your why to walk through this process, get clarity on the mindsets that are getting in your way, and identify next steps forward, including whether or not the culture shock solution might be a right fit for you. It's 100% free. There's no cost. And it is not for you if you're fine with just going through the motions and living in survival mode. If you just want to blame them and these people, and you don't really want to grow as a person. But it is for you if you're committed to the process of really getting settled into your host culture. You want to stop wasting time on things that don't work. You're coachable. You want to move forward, and you know that forward isn't a straight line. It's a bit circular, and there's back and forth. But you are ready to really thrive in your life overseas. And so if that sounds like you, then you can just click that link and yeah, we'll connect the dots between some of the things we're talking about here and what you're experiencing. And we can back up that, I really do believe you have what it takes. But we'll talk through and come to the point where you believe that too. And you can articulate some reasons why, and the skills and strengths that you already have that would enable you to thrive overseas. So again, the call is free. It's an hour. And if you're not sure if it's culture shock, great, because we'll figure it out together. If you think having the call is going to be confusing and frustrating, and I don't even know if I want to open that can of worms and talk about this or that or the other thing, or I think it's really just my coworkers, or maybe it's my husband, or my, like there's all these things. Maybe I'm depressed. I'm not sure. We'll talk. And I am confident, and actually research bears out that talking to an empathetic listener helps us significantly. It literally rewires the brain. It brings calm to the brain. And so even if we just talk for an hour and it really is about your spouse, you'll feel better at the end of the call and hopefully even walk away with a next step. So it's totally worth it. And yeah, I really look forward to figuring out a good time for you guys. So thanks for your time today. Thanks for joining. Lawrence, it was good to see you again. And yeah, if anybody has additional questions, feel free to stick around. Otherwise, look forward to catching a call with you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Lawrence.
Bye-bye.
Robin, are you at a place where you're able to unmute, or do you need to be muted? I'm going to stop the recording.